They say money buys anything in this city. Comfort, power, silence, you name it. But turns out, it also buys secrets. The kind that really get under your skin and just stay there, festering like an old wound that refuses to heal. A constant reminder of something you wish you could forget, but know you never will. My name's Michael. I used to drive for a man who, let's just say, had more money than God and probably more secrets than all the midnight alleys in this metropolis combined. A labyrinth of hidden truths behind a facade of immense wealth. He had one rule for me, a single, seemingly simple instruction that became the axis around which my life began to spin into terrifying new territory. "Michael," he'd said, his voice calm yet carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "After midnight, whatever you do, whatever you think you hear or feel, never, ever look in the car's rearview mirror." Man, I wish I'd never found out why that simple piece of reflective glass became the most terrifying object in my existence. This sprawling metropolis, that's my city, a place that thrums with an untamed, irresistible energy. It's got this palpable pulse, you know? A vibrant, chaotic heartbeat you can feel right through the soles of your feet. A rhythm that dictates the lives of millions. I grew up in a tough neighborhood, and life there? It was a relentless, colorful, vibrant, chaotic dance. Always something happening. A symphony of sounds, smells, and sights that overwhelmed the senses in the best and sometimes most challenging ways. My mother, Mama Rose. What an incredible woman she was, a true force of nature. A market trader through and through. Her laugh was as loud and infectious as her colorful head wraps were vibrant. And the distinctive clack of her beads was a familiar, comforting sound in our bustling household. She always used to tell me, her voice full of wisdom and a hint of playful warning. "Michael, Omomi, my son, your destiny is bright. I feel it in my bones, but remember this always. Even the brightest, most glorious day inevitably casts a shadow. Be wise, my child. Be discerning." Her words, imbued with a lifetime of experience, they were like my compass, guiding me through the complexities of life. Back then, before Mr. Adekunle, I was just a young guy trying to find my way in the world, navigating the daily struggles. My biggest worry? How to find enough money to pay for Mama Rose's new medication, or finally get that perpetually leaky roof fixed before the next big rain. Then this job offer landed squarely in my lap, seemingly out of nowhere, like a blessing from the heavens. Driver to the one and only Mr. Adekunle. Just saying his name. It was like invoking a legend, you know? His name was whispered in awe in every corner of the city, from the poorest slums to the most opulent mansions. Billionaire, incredibly influential, a man deeply rooted in very traditional ways, despite his modern empire. My entire neighborhood even threw a small, impromptu party to celebrate my good fortune. "Michael has entered." They all cheered, their faces beaming with genuine happiness for me. "Ah, you'll be swimming in cash now, my friend." And man, I felt this overwhelming rush of pure, unadulterated hope. A sensation so potent it almost made me dizzy. This was it, I thought. This was my big chance, the opportunity one had been praying for. My golden ticket to finally give Mama Rose the kind of comfortable, secure life she truly deserved after all her years of hard work and sacrifice for me. Mr. Adekunle's mansion? It was a whole other universe compared to the familiar, bustling streets of my youth. It was like stepping onto a different planet altogether. Looming behind these immense, imposing black gates that seemed to guard unspeakable secrets, the estate was protected not just by stern-faced security men in crisp uniforms, but also by these towering, intricately carved wooden statues of old gods. The god of thunder, with his iconic double-headed axe held menacingly aloft, the god of iron and war, looking incredibly fierce and tough, their eyes painted this stark, unervingly watchful crimson red that seemed to follow your every move. Inside the sprawling compound, the very air felt heavy, thick with unspoken things. You could distinctly smell the cloying aroma of burning incense, the rich scent of old leather from antique furniture, and something else. Something indefinable, elusive, a scent I just couldn't put my finger on, but which tickled the edges of my awareness with a subtle sense of unease. The main housekeeper was this stern, older woman, Auntie Ronk. She was always impeccably dressed in her traditional attire, her headscarf tied with practiced precision, heavy, antique ivory bangles adorning her wrists, clacking softly with her every movement. She moved like a silent shadow, that one, gliding through the opulent halls with an air of quiet authority. No smiles ever graced her lips, just these curt, almost imperceptible nods and a penetrating look that screamed she knew way more than she'd ever let on, that she was a keeper of the house's deepest secrets. One time, as I walked by, she even muttered under her breath, her voice barely audible but her words chilling. "This house has its ways, young man. You best learn them quickly if you wish to last here." That first night, what felt like an initiation, Mr. Adecunnel summoned me to his private study, a room that exuded an aura of power and mystery. It was a dim, cavernous space, packed from floor to ceiling with antique books bound in aged leather, and more of those intricately carved artifacts, masks and figures that seemed to watch me with hollow eyes. He was sitting behind this massive, imposing mahogany desk, a truly formidable figure in his pristine white traditional robes, exquisitely embroidered with shimmering gold thread that caught the low light. His ever-present walking stick, the one with a fearsome lion's head intricately carved from dark, polished wood, was resting right beside him, like a scepter of his authority. And his eyes, they were sharp, incredibly piercing, like he was looking right through my carefully constructed composure, stripping away my defenses and peering directly into my soul, weighing my worth. The intensity of his gaze made me feel completely exposed, and a prickle of apprehension ran down my spine before he even spoke a single word. "Michael!" His voice, when it finally came, was deep, profoundly deep, like the sound of distant thunder rolling in across the plains before a major storm, a sound that resonated in my very chest. "You'll be my personal driver. You take me where I need to go, at any hour, no questions asked, ever. You'll see a lot of things, Michael. You'll undoubtedly hear a lot of things, conversations not meant for your ears, glimpses into worlds you do not understand. But there's one thing, one very specific, non-negotiable instruction you must obey. No excuses, no lapses in judgment." He leaned forward then, the polished mahogany of the desk gleaming faintly, his gaze totally fixed on me, pinning me to my seat. "After the clock officially strikes midnight, when you're driving me, you are never, under any circumstances, to look in the car's rearview mirror. It doesn't matter what you think you see, what strange sounds you might hear, or what unsettling sensations you might feel. Your eyes stay fixed on that road ahead. Do you understand me clearly?" The way he emphasized never sent a shiver of profound unease through me. This was no ordinary request. A shiver, cold and sharp, went straight down my spine, despite the warm, stuffy air in the study. Such a bizarre, almost unsettling thing to ask, so incredibly specific and delivered with such grave seriousness. "Yes, sir," I managed to croak out, my throat suddenly feeling as dry as the seasonal dust, my voice barely a whisper. "I understand completely." He just nodded slowly, his expression unreadable, and there was this fleeting flicker of something in his ancient-looking eyes that I couldn't decipher, something that might have been satisfaction, or perhaps a hint of warning. Then, with a deliberate movement, he pushed a small, obviously worn leather pouch across the vast expanse of the desk towards me. It was surprisingly heavy for its size when I picked it up. "Keep this with you at all times," he said, his voice a low command. "Always, whenever you are driving for me, especially at night. It's for your protection." "Protection? Protection from what? Exactly?" Man, I wanted to ask so badly, the question burning on the tip of my tongue. But the way his jaw tensed up almost imperceptibly, the subtle hardening of his already formidable features, I knew instinctively that question wasn't welcome, that some doors were best left unopened. My first official night driving Mr. Adekunle was surprisingly, almost disappointingly normal, at least for the initial hours, until the ominous chime of the clock struck 12. The Mercedes, that gleaming black beast of a car, so luxurious and powerful, hummed almost silently along the city roads, a stark, almost surreal contrast to the noisy, chaotic public buses that had been the soundtrack of my past life. Mr. Adekunle was in the back, as silent as ever, a stoic, enigmatic presence mostly. We went to some high society event, the kind of opulent gathering where the perfume is eye-wateringly expensive and the laughter sounds a bit too practiced, a bit too forced, echoing with an undercurrent of social maneuvering. I kept my eyes diligently on the road, Mr. Adekunle a mostly still, shadowy figure in the periphery of my vision, occasionally reflected in the side mirrors. But his strange, insistent warning echoed constantly in my mind, a low, persistent thrum of anxiety that tightened my chest. As midnight approached, minute by painstaking minute, I could feel my palms begin to sweat, clinging uncomfortably to the smooth leather of the steering wheel. The rule, his one, inexplicable rule. It felt like a heavy, suffocating cloak, wrapping around me, making it hard to breathe normally. The pouch, that small, worn leather pouch he'd given me, its surface softened with age and handling, its contents a complete mystery. I tucked it carefully into the inner pocket of my uniform jacket, as instructed, feeling its unfamiliar weight against my chest. During those initial daytime drives, shuttling Mr. Adekunle to business meetings or social lunches, it was just a lump, a slightly uncomfortable, tangible reminder of the strange, unsettling rule that governed my nights. But as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, and we ventured out for Mr. Adekunle's more nocturnal appointments, I started to notice something peculiar about it. A faint warmth, not an alarming heat, nothing that would cause discomfort, just there. A subtle, almost imperceptible heat emanating from it. A gentle thrum against my chest, like the soft, rhythmic breathing of a sleeping creature nestled close. Sometimes, quite unexpectedly, when Mr. Adekunle shifted restlessly in the back seat, or when the vibrant city lights flickered into the car in a certain disorienting way, the warmth from the pouch would intensify for a brief moment, pulsing with a soft, almost living energy. I'd find myself unconsciously touching it through the fabric of my jacket, wondering about its purpose, its contents. Protection, he'd said so cryptically. But protection from what looming, unseen dangers? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Auntie Ronk, the formidable housekeeper with eyes that missed nothing, remained a figure of stern, unapproachable mystery within Mr. Adekunle's sprawling mansion. Her greetings, when she offered them at all, were clipped and formal, her instructions for my duties delivered with an air of precise, no-nonsense efficiency. But her eyes, they followed me, I was sure of it, with an intensity that was deeply unsettling, especially just before I was scheduled for a late-night drive with Mr. Adekunle. On several occasions, she'd silently hand me a small, intricately sealed calabash of water, her weathered fingers brushing mine for just a fraction of a second too long. A contact that felt charged with unspoken meaning. "The night air is different here, Michael," she said once, her voice low and conspiratorial, her gaze flicking meaningfully towards Mr. Adekunle's private wing of the mansion, a place I never ventured near. "Stay alert. Not all roads you travel will be smooth, and some paths are fraught with perils you cannot yet imagine." It wasn't a threat, not exactly, or at least it didn't feel like one. It felt more like a cryptic warning, a piece of a much larger, far more dangerous puzzle for which I didn't have nearly enough of the other parts to comprehend. Her heavy ivory bangles would clack softly, a sound that began to symbolize her enigmatic presence, as she turned and glided away, leaving me with a swirling vortex of more questions than answers and a growing sense of foreboding. It was incredibly subtle at first, a creeping sensation I almost dismissed as my imagination working overtime due to Mr. Adekunle's strange rule. But the city, my city, the metropolis I knew and loved, started to feel different, especially after dark. The city I was familiar with, the one that pulsed with an almost frenetic life and an undeniable, infectious energy, seemed to have a hidden twin, a shadowy counterpart that only emerged under the cloak of night. A night self, more ancient and far more sinister. During the day, the streets were their usual familiar selves, the persistent calls of the hawkers selling everything imaginable, the iconic yellow public buses weaving precariously through traffic, the vibrant, overwhelming, yet somehow comforting chaos of it all. But as dusk settled like a shroud over the sprawling metropolis, and particularly when I was on duty for Mr. Adekunle, making those late-night journeys, the shadows in the alleyways seemed to stretch and deepen, becoming more menacing, more alive. Familiar landmarks, buildings and streets I'd known my whole life took on an eerie, almost alien quality, like seeing a close friend's face suddenly distorted in a disorienting, nightmarish dream. It was as if Mr. Adekunle's very presence in the car, or perhaps the mysterious nature of the journeys he undertook, somehow peeled back a delicate layer of everyday reality, revealing something much older, something far more primal, something watchful, lurking just beneath the surface of the modern city. I made sure to visit Mama Rose on my designated day off, seeking a much-needed anchor to the life I understood, the world that still made sense to me, the familiar, comforting smell of her delicious cooking. Her special rice was legendary, and her loud, gloriously infectious laugh. These were the things that grounded me, a temporary respite from the creeping unease of my new job. But she was incredibly perceptive, my mother. She always had been, possessing an intuition that bordered on the uncanny. "Michael Omomi," she said one afternoon, her hand resting gently on my arm, her usual boundless cheerfulness noticeably muted, replaced by a flicker of concern in her loving eyes. "Your eyes? They carry a new kind of weight, my son. A shadow I haven't seen there before. This new job, it is good money, yes? It is providing for us?" I nodded, trying to inject a level of enthusiasm into my voice that I didn't truly feel, hoping to reassure her. She looked at me then, her gaze searching, trying to penetrate the defenses I was hastily erecting. "Remember what I always told you about shadows, Michael. Some are fleeting, passing quickly with the changing light. Others have deep roots, anchoring them firmly to dark places. Be very careful where you let your own shadow fall, my child." Her words, usually a source of profound comfort and gentle wisdom, now sent a fresh, unexpected chill racing down my spine. She knew somehow, she sensed that something was profoundly off, even if I couldn't bring myself to tell her what exactly was troubling me, what strange new world I was now navigating. Most of our initial evening trips were to destinations that I could easily recognize, even if I'd never had a reason or the means to step inside their hallowed halls. Grand government buildings exuding an air of imposing authority, exclusive, members-only clubs hidden behind discreet, unmarked doors, and the heavily fortified, sprawling compounds of other immensely wealthy magnates and influential figures in the city's complex social hierarchy. But then, quite gradually, the nature of our destinations started to change, shifting from the familiar to the distinctly unfamiliar and unsettling. We'd leave the brightly lit avenues and the reassuring thrum of mainstream city life far behind, weaving instead through labyrinthine, unlit backstreets, navigating areas of the city I barely knew existed, places that felt like they belonged to a different era, a forgotten metropolis. Sometimes we'd pull up beside unassuming, almost dilapidated buildings, structures that looked abandoned from the outside, but from which strange, rhythmic chanting and the faint scent of unusual incense could be faintly heard drifting on the night air. Other times, our destination would be a silent, pitch-dark clearing down by the murky waterfront, The air thick with the pungent smell of damp earth, decaying mangrove roots, and something else, something indescribably ancient and vaguely unsettling that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. Mr. Adekunle never offered any explanation for these bizarre excursions. He'd simply step out of the Mercedes, sometimes with a curt, almost dismissive nod in my direction, sometimes with a terse wait, and then he would disappear silently into the surrounding gloom, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a growing sense of deep unease. And then came that particular night, the one that etched itself into my memory with chilling clarity. It started off like any other late run, or so I tried to tell myself, attempting to maintain a veneer of normalcy. I had on my best shirt, the crisp blue striped one Mama Rose had painstakingly starched for me earlier that week, and my old faded red cap. She always said it was my good luck charm. A superstition I found myself clinging to more and more. Mr. Adekunle, he was dressed in this incredibly ornate, flowing traditional robe, the intricate gold threads woven into the fabric glinting faintly in the dim ambient light filtering into the car. He was even quieter than usual that evening, a heavy, brooding silence emanating from him. And his mere presence just filled the luxurious confines of the Mercedes with this thick, almost tangible tension that you could practically cut with a knife. As we drove through the now familiar nocturnal city, the streets, though physically the same, felt somehow strange, subtly altered, kind of alien and unwelcoming. That familiar growing dread, the one that had become my constant companion on these night drives, was back with a vengeance, coiling itself tightly in the pit of my stomach. And the usual vibrant city noise, the incessant blare of horns, the distant throb of music from late-night bars, the fading cries of vendors packing up their wares, it all seemed to just recede, to fade away into an eerie background hum, replaced by this weird, profoundly unnatural quiet that pressed in on the car from all sides. The dashboard clock, a small digital display glowing in innocuous green, seemed to pulse with a malevolent rhythm, each second stretching into an eternity of suspense. The numbers relentlessly marched forward, 11:58, 11:59, and then, as if a hidden switch had been flipped in the very fabric of reality itself, it was 12 midnight, the precise moment Mr. Adekunle had warned me about with such gravity, the hour when the veil between worlds supposedly thinned to its most fragile state. Outwardly, nothing had changed in that split second. The car still hummed its quiet, powerful tune. The city lights still streaked past the windows like fleeting memories. But an imperceptible, yet profoundly significant shift occurred. A collective drawing in of breath before a terrifying plunge into the unknown. I could feel the immense weight of that single stark rule. Don't look in the mirror. Pressing down on me, suffocating me, the silence in the car suddenly becoming expectant, almost predatory, as if the night itself was holding its breath, waiting with bated anticipation for the forbidden to begin. It was the kind of profound quiet that screams louder than any cacophony of noise, a terrifying void that my own rapidly accelerating heartbeat tried desperately and futilely to fill. And just like that, as if summoned by the stroke of midnight, the whole vibe in the car transformed, palpably and terrifyingly. It wasn't just me. I swear it wasn't my imagination playing tricks on me. The change was too real, too visceral. The temperature inside the Mercedes plummeted dramatically. This sudden, clammy, bone-chilling cold that had absolutely zero to do with the air conditioning system, which I hadn't even touched. I could physically feel the hairs on my arms stand up, prickling my skin, a primitive response to an unseen threat. My palms, gripping that smooth, expensive leather steering wheel with all my might, started to sweat profusely, making my grip feel slick and insecure, as a wave of pure, unadulterated fear washed over me, cold and sharp. Then I heard it. A sound that turned my blood to ice and made my heart stop dead in my chest. A whisper, so soft, so faint. It was like the sound of dry leaves blowing mournfully across a desolate concrete pavement on a cold, lonely night. It sounded like it was coming from right behind me, directly from the back seat, where Mr. Atacunnel was supposed to be the only other occupant. "Michael!" it breathed, my name drawn out in a sibilant, chilling exhalation. My blood just turned to ice water in my veins. Every nerve ending screamed. That definitely wasn't Mr. Atacunnel's deep, resonant voice. This was something else entirely. Feminine, kind of, but all twisted and distorted, ghostly and ethereal, sending tendrils of pure terror coiling around my heart. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles probably showing white through my skin. My eyes shot instinctively towards the rearview mirror, a subconscious reflex, but then I remembered Mr. Atacunnel's terrifying, absolute warning. "Don't look. No matter what. My life, my sanity, might depend on it." The whispering didn't stop. If anything, it kept going, seeming to grow closer now, more intimate, as if someone, or something, was leaning right over my shoulder, its breath cold against my neck. It wasn't saying my name anymore, just murmuring these incomprehensible words, a continuous, hissing stream of sibilant sounds and guttural clicks that made my teeth ache and my skin crawl with a primal revulsion. The air inside the car got thick, heavy, almost unbreathable, cloying with this sickly sweet, yet deeply unsettling smell. Damp earth, yes, that was definitely part of it. But also that sharp, acrid, bitter smell of burning palm oil, a ritualistic aroma. The kind of smell that always emanated from old, hidden shrines, the very ones involved in the traditional rituals Mama Rose had always warned me, with a stern look in her eyes, to steer well clear of places where the veil between worlds was thin. It wasn't just Mr. Atacunnel's expensive, imported cologne or the rich scent of the Mercedes' fine leather seats anymore. It was as if the very atmosphere from another place, a wilder, more primal, and infinitely more terrifying place, was seeping inexorably into the car, displacing the normal air. My head swam with the potent, disorienting combination of these alien scents, making me feel nauseous and lightheaded. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a terrified, trapped bird desperately trying to escape its cage. I could see shadows dancing, right at the very edge of the rear-view mirror's reflection, dark, indistinct shapes just flickering tantalizingly out of sight before I could properly register them. Were they merely innocent reflections from the streetlights and buildings we were passing outside? Or were they actually inside the car with us, moving stealthily in the darkness behind me? My breath caught painfully in my throat, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. On some subsequent nights, after this first truly terrifying encounter with a whispering entity, different, equally unsettling sounds would emerge from the back seat once midnight had passed. Faint drumming, so incredibly distant at first that it could have easily been a figment of my stressed imagination. Yet it felt like it was vibrating up through the very seats of the car, a primal, hypnotic rhythm that resonated deep within my bones, unsettling and profoundly ancient. It was never loud, always hovering just on the very edge of hearing, a ghostly pulse in the silence, making me constantly doubt my own senses, questioning whether I was slowly losing my mind under the strain of it all. Every single primal instinct I possessed, every fiber of my being, was screaming at me to look, to turn around, to snatch a glance in that forbidden mirror, to figure out what was making those terrifying, inhuman sounds, what this chilling, unseen presence in the car actually was. Was Mr. Atacunnel okay back there? Was he even still himself? Or had he been replaced or transformed by something else? The Mercedes felt like it was pushing through thick, heavy water rather than air, and the profound, unnatural silence that had fallen outside the car just made everything happening inside seem infinitely louder, more grotesquely horrible. I just stared rigidly ahead at the road, my gaze fixed on those endless yellow lines stretching out into what looked like a giant, dark, devouring mouth, the abyss of the night. That small leather pouch in my jacket pocket? It was seriously hot now. Not just warm, but burning. This small, fierce, almost painful warmth pushing back with surprising intensity against the icy, paralyzing fear that had me completely in its grip. I fumble for it with trembling fingers, my hand finally closing around the worn, strangely comforting leather. And as I clutched it tightly, the insidious whispers, the strange, cloying smells, the unsettling, ancient drumming, they all seemed to pull back, just a tiny, almost imperceptible bit, as if recoiling from the pouch's sudden, intense heat. We were heading for the old, historic part of the city, a labyrinth of narrow, winding streets snaking between these ancient, crumbling buildings. Their weathered walls bore faded, almost obliterated traditional symbols and intricate carvings that looked like archaic eyes, watching us with silent judgment as we passed deeper into their domain. This definitely wasn't one of our usual, more mundane routes to some fancy high society party or a sterile corporate skyscraper. This felt profoundly different, charged with an unseen energy. It felt like we were deliberately going deeper and deeper into the city's hidden, secret heart, a place where the old ways still held sway, far from the modern world's prying eyes. The shadows I'd only just glimpsed in my peripheral vision, those fleeting, insubstantial movements, grew bolder and more defined on subsequent night drives. They were still not clearly defined shapes, not things I could name or describe, but rather fleeting, teasing movements, darker patches of blackness in the already dim, ambient light of the car's luxurious interior, always dancing just beyond the point where I could properly see them without turning my head, or daring to look into that forbidden, malevolent mirror. They danced at the very edges of my sight, teasing me, menacing me, as if aware of Mr. Adekunal's injunction and delighting in my enforced ignorance and growing terror. The sudden, profoundly clammy cold became a regular, unwelcome companion on our journeys after the clock struck precisely at midnight. It wasn't just an ordinary drop in the ambient temperature inside the car. It was a peculiar, penetrating cold that seeped deep into your bones, making your teeth chatter uncontrollably regardless of how high I desperately turned up the car's heater in a futile attempt to combat it. It felt completely unnatural, like the chilling absence of warmth itself, an entity that was actively sucking the very life and heat out of the air within the Mercedes. My fingers would grow stiff and clumsy on the steering wheel, making driving feel treacherous, and a persistent, icy shiver would trace its unwelcome way up and down my spine, a constant, unwelcome reminder that something was profoundly, terrifyingly wrong in the back of that luxurious Mercedes, something beyond human comprehension. This was not just a draft. It was a presence, a cold, malevolent entity making its proximity known in the most uncomfortable way imaginable. Dozens of times, perhaps even hundreds, as these terrifying nocturnal journeys continued, I carefully formulated pressing questions in my head, rehearsing them silently, desperate for answers, for some kind of explanation. Urgent questions for Mr. Adekunal, probing questions for the enigmatic Auntie Ronk. Sir, with all due respect, what exactly is in the car with us after midnight? What am I not supposed to see? Or, approaching the housekeeper in my mind, Auntie, what did you truly mean by your cryptic warning that the night air is different here? But then, one single look at Mr. Adekunal's stern, incredibly impassive face in the daylight, or Auntie Ronk's perpetually guarded, knowing expression, and the carefully rehearsed words would die in my throat unspoken. There was an invisible, yet absolutely palpable boundary, a line I sensed with every instinct that I should not, under any circumstances, cross if I valued my lucrative job, and perhaps, more importantly, my increasingly fragile sanity. The oppressive silence, the deliberate withholding of information, was clearly part of the package deal, an intrinsic part of the heavy, unspoken price I had to pay for the material comfort my substantial earnings now provided for Mama Rose, a comfort I couldn't bear to jeopardize. There was one particularly treacherous night. The rain was absolutely torrential, hammering down on the car roof like 1,000 angry drummers, reducing visibility to almost zero, the windscreen wipers struggling to keep pace. Suddenly, a reckless, impatient motorcycle rider, seemingly appearing out of nowhere from the blinding curtain of rain, swerved right in front of me, a terrifyingly close call. Instinctively, without a moment's thought, I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching on the slick tarmac, and my eyes, purely on reflex, flicked upwards to the rearview mirror. A driver's conditioned response to check on my passenger, Mr. Adecunnel, after such a sudden maneuver. For a horrifying split second, a mere micro-moment frozen in time, I almost saw something that was definitely not the familiar silhouette of Mr. Adecunnel. Something else. Something other. But the image, if it was even real, was far too fast, too fragmented and chaotic, like a single, terrifying frame from a rapidly flashing nightmare. My heart leaped violently into my throat, threatening to choke me. I wrenched my gaze forcefully back to the road ahead, my body shaking uncontrollably from the near miss and the even nearer forbidden glimpse. "Eyes on the road, Michael," Mr. Adecunnel's voice rumbled from the back seat, surprisingly calm but with an unmistakable, sharp edge of cold steel. I didn't know if he'd actually seen my near slip, my momentary lapse, but the warning, the implicit threat, was crystal clear. The pouch in my jacket pocket pulsed then, a dull, throbbing, insistent heat, as if admonishing me for my carelessness. One particularly unsettling night, a night that felt different from the outset. We drove far out of the familiar confines of the city, venturing deeper into the surrounding countryside than we had ever gone before on any of our nocturnal excursions. The well-paved road eventually dwindled to a rough, uneven dirt track, hemmed in claustrophobically on both sides by dense, dark, impenetrable bush that seemed to swallow the car's headlights. We finally stopped at a place that felt incredibly ancient, almost prehistoric, a clearing dominated by a colossal, gnarled silk cotton tree, its massive, exposed roots looking like the grasping claws of some monstrous subterranean creature. The air here was thick, almost viscous, with the incessant, deafening chirping of unseen insects and a strange, unfamiliar smell I'd never encountered before in my life. A potent, earthy mix of rich, damp soil, decaying leaves, and something else, something faintly, unsettlingly metallic, like old blood. Mr. Adecunnel got out of the car, not with his usual ornate walking stick, but carrying a small, intricately carved wooden box that I hadn't seen him possess before. He walked silently towards the giant, menacing tree and then simply disappeared into the deep, oppressive shadows beneath its massive, sprawling canopy, as if the darkness itself had consumed him. He was gone for what felt like an eternity, hours stretching into an age, leaving me alone in the eerie silence of the bush, a silence from the back seat that was heavier, more pregnant with unspoken dread than ever before that night. Finally, after what felt like an absolute eternity trapped in that rolling capsule of sheer, unadulterated terror, with the insidious whispers clawing relentlessly at my sanity and the profoundly unnatural cold seeping deep into my very marrow, chilling me to the core, a sound pierced the oppressive, charged atmosphere. It wasn't another ghostly murmur or an unsettling primal rhythm. It was Mr. Adecunnel's voice, so impossibly calm and remarkably steady under the circumstances. It was like a solid, unshakable anchor in a violent storm of unseen, unimaginable horrors. "Stop here, Michael," he commanded, his tone perfectly even, utterly devoid of any acknowledgement or recognition of the chilling, terrifying phenomena that had just transpired in his presence, as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred at all. The simple, mundane instruction, one that would be unremarkable under any other circumstance, sliced cleanly through the thick, palpable tension like a freshly sharpened blade, instantly causing the terrifying symphony of the unseen to falter, to diminish, as if his spoken words held an undeniable authority even over the otherworldly entities that haunted his car. My heart still hammered violently against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear, but a tiny, bewildered sliver of relief tried to push its way through the overwhelming terror. The ordeal, or at least this particular, horrifying part of it, seemed to be momentarily paused, held in abeyance by his calm, authoritative command. I pulled the Mercedes over to the side of the road, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage the simple act of shifting the gear lever into park. We were on this dark, eerily empty street, a location I didn't recognize at all. A crumbling, dilapidated old colonial building, its windows like vacant eyes, stood on one side, and the inky black, silent expanse of the water lay menacingly on the other, its surface like polished obsidian under the faint moonlight. The very second Mr. Adekunle spoke those simple words, "Stop here," those weird, terrifying sounds, the whispers, the rustlings, the faint drumming, just stopped. Abruptly, completely. The horrible, bone-deep cold that had permeated the car even eased up a bit, the oppressive chill receding noticeably, allowing me to take a slightly less ragged breath. The sudden cessation of the paranormal activity was almost as unnerving as its presence had been, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. He leaned forward then, the faint, dim glow from the dashboard instruments casting his powerful face in a stark, unsettling play of deep shadows and dim, ghostly highlights. It was in that precise moment, under that strange, almost ethereal illumination, that I saw his eyes properly for what felt like the very first time that terrifying night, or perhaps ever. These were not the sharp, shrewd, assessing eyes of the powerful, calculating billionaire I knew. The man who commanded vast boardrooms with an iron will, and whose name was whispered throughout the city with a mixture of awe and trepidation. No, the eyes that were now fixed intently on me were something else entirely. Something that didn't seem to belong to the realm of ordinary, everyday human experience. They were ancient, profoundly deep, like dark, fathomless wells filled with the accumulated darkness of forgotten ages, and a chilling knowing that went far beyond mere business deals and complex societal influence. It was a gaze that seemed to pierce right through my carefully constructed composure, my terror, seeing not just a frightened young driver, but perhaps something more, something deeper hidden within me, and it held a chilling, undeniable weight of forgotten lore, a silent, profound understanding of the terrifying abyss we had just skirted together. Looking directly into them, I felt an icy, visceral dread far colder and more terrifying than the supernatural chill that had moments before filled the car. A primal, instinctual fear acknowledging a depth of power and a length of history I could not begin to comprehend, making my bones feel as if they were turning to fragile, brittle glass. "Michael," he said, his voice now this low, resonant rumble that seemed to make the whole car vibrate gently around me, a sound that felt as old as the earth itself. "You did well tonight. Remarkably well. Not every man, not even most men, can follow simple, explicit instructions when raw fear is whispering insidious suggestions directly in his ear, when his own mind is screaming at him to do the opposite." He paused then, and this thin, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. A smile that held absolutely no warmth, no humor, only a kind of ancient, predatory satisfaction. "But tonight, Michael, was just an introduction, a mere preliminary test of your nerve, of your obedience, of your capacity to endure the unseen." He made it sound like there was so much more to come, so much worse. He opened his door then, and the sudden brightness of the interior dome light through these quick, eerie, dancing shadows all around the confines of the car, making familiar shapes seem alien and distorted. "Tomorrow, and all the nights that are to follow after that, you are going to see things, experience things, that would make even the bravest, most hardened men in this entire city turn and run screaming into the night. You will encounter things that have always been here, existing just beneath the fragile skin of this metropolis, hidden from unprepared eyes. Remember your promise to me, Michael, your unwavering obedience, and keep that pouch close to you at all times. Its protection will be more crucial than you can yet fathom." And just like that, with those ominous parting words hanging heavily in the suddenly still air, he stepped out of the Mercedes. His pristine white traditional robes seemed to almost glow with an unnatural luminescence in the surrounding darkness before he just melted silently away into the deep shadows of some unlit, foreboding alleyway. He left me there, completely alone, the driver's door still hanging open, the interior of the car now slowly refilling with the familiar, yet suddenly more sinister, smell of Mr. Adekunle's expensive incense and the lingering scent of damp, disturbed earth. I just sat there for ages, or what certainly felt like ages, the engine of the powerful Mercedes idling softly, its gentle hum the only discernible sound in this sudden, heavy, oppressive silence that descended once Mr. Adekunle had vanished. My heart was still hammering away furiously against my ribs, a wild, frantic drum beating out a rhythm of pure terror against the distant, muted hum of the sprawling city slowly going to sleep. Fear was like this living, breathing thing coiled inside me, cold and sharp and barbed. Its tendrils wrapped tightly around my lungs, making it hard to draw a full breath. What on earth had actually been in that car with us just moments before? Or, an even scarier, more unsettling thought began to take root in my terrified mind. What had Mr. Adekunle himself become back there, in the impenetrable darkness of his back seat, hidden from my sight? The long drive back to Mr. Adekunle's fortified mansion, through deserted streets and flickering lamplight, was unequivocally the longest, most nerve-wracking journey of my entire life. Every deep shadow seemed to jump out at me, to take on monstrous forms. Every innocent rustle of leaves in the night breeze sounded exactly like those awful, sibilant whispers again, clawing at the edges of my hearing. The city I knew, the vibrant, familiar, bustling place I had grown up in, it felt as though someone had brutally peeled back a comforting, everyday layer, revealing a much darker, more ancient, and infinitely more terrifying city lurking just beneath the surface. A city I was now forced to navigate. When I finally, blessedly, reached the perceived safety of Mr. Adekunle's imposing compound, my hands still trembling slightly, I parked the gleaming black Mercedes in its usual designated spot within the vast, silent garage. Before gathering the courage to actually get out of the vehicle, I hesitated, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. My hand, visibly trembling despite my best efforts to still it, reached up almost involuntarily and touched the cold glass of the rearview mirror. It was just a mirror again on the surface, reflecting the plush, now empty back seat, the polished dark wood trim of the luxurious interior, the shadowy, silent expanse of the concrete garage behind me. But it felt different now. It felt tainted, somehow defiled by what it had potentially reflected, what it had been privy to. The glass was cold to the touch, unnaturally so, like a doorway to something I just couldn't wrap my terrified mind around. A forbidden portal that had perhaps shown horrifying glimpses of another, darker world that existed parallel to our own. I snatched my hand back sharply, as if the cold surface had burned me. From that moment on, even during the bright, seemingly normal light of day, that innocuous rearview mirror held a deeply sinister fascination for me, a silent, mocking challenge, a constant reminder of the horrors of the night. Sleep rapidly became a precious, unattainable luxury I could rarely, if ever, afford in the weeks and months that followed that first truly terrifying night. How could I possibly rest? How could I allow myself to drift into unconsciousness? When my overactive mind relentlessly replayed the chilling, sibilant whispers, the unnatural, bone-deep cold, the palpable feeling of an unseen, malevolent presence sharing the car with me. Mr. Adekunle's ominous words, "Tonight was just an introduction," echoed constantly in my ears, a haunting refrain every single time the clock in the Mercedes ticked inexorably closer to the dreaded hour of midnight. And he wasn't wrong, not by a long shot. The introductions, as he so calmly called them, kept coming. Each subsequent night, a horrifying variation on a soul-crushing theme of unseen, unimaginable terror. New sounds, new smells, new sensations designed to test my resolve. During the day, I walked around in a perpetual daze, a zombie going through the motions of life. The once vibrant, stimulating colors of my neighborhood market seemed duller, muted. The usually infectious laughter of my friends and family sounded more distant, as if coming from a great, unbridgeable gulf. I was living a terrifying double life. One foot in the ordinary world, the other firmly planted in a realm of shadows, and the immense strain of it all was beginning to show, etching lines of worry and exhaustion onto my face. The nights that followed that initial, paradigm-shifting horror were a nightmarish blur of clenched jaws, white-knuckled grips on the steering wheel, and eyes locked rigidly, unblinkingly on the road ahead, terrified of what a stray glance might reveal. Some nights, the very air inside the luxurious Mercedes would grow thick and heavy, not just with the now familiar, unsettling smell of damp earth and decay, but with the cloying, overpowering scent of unfamiliar, exotic spices, strong and acrid, making my head spin and my stomach churn with nausea. Other nights, the faint, distant drumming returned, but it was more insistent now, more urgent, a primal, throbbing rhythm that vibrated up through the expensive leather seats and deep into my bones, feeling as if it was trying to physically pull something vital out of me, to draw out my very soul. I never looked. I never once broke Mr. Adekunle's cardinal rule. I just drove, gripping the wheel until my knuckles were white and aching. The vivid image of Mr. Adekunle's ancient, knowing eyes burned indelibly into my memory, a constant reminder of the power he wielded and the secrets he kept. The dread was a constant, unwelcome companion now, a cold, hard knot permanently lodged in my stomach that tightened painfully with every approaching midnight, heralding another descent into fear. That small, unassuming leather pouch became my constant, most treasured companion, its emanating warmth a small, vital anchor in a vast, turbulent sea of ever-growing, soul-crushing dread. Sometimes, when the presence in the back seat felt particularly strong, particularly malevolent and oppressive, the pouch would grow almost painfully hot against my skin. A searing heat that was both alarming and strangely reassuring, and in response, the terrifying whispers or the strange, unidentifiable sounds would seem to recede, just a little, their intensity lessening for a brief respite. It was abundantly clear by now that this wasn't just some ordinary good luck charm, not some simple talisman. It was a shield, a powerful form of protection, though against what, exactly, I still couldn't fathom, and the terrifying possibilities made my blood run cold just contemplating them. How could I continue to share an easy laugh with Mama Rose over her colorful market tales? How could I engage in normal, everyday conversations when my nights were now filled with things I couldn't possibly explain? Things that felt like they belonged to a different, much older, and far more sinister world. The metropolis, my beloved city, now wore two distinct faces for me. The one I knew and loved, bustling and alive with energy and commerce, and the other, the one I drove Mr. Adekunle through after the witching hour. A terrifying, shadowy place of ancient, forgotten powers and dark secrets that felt heavier, more burdensome, than all of Mr. Adekunle's considerable gold. Despite the pervasive, bone-chilling fear that had become my constant shadow, or perhaps, paradoxically, because of it, an undeniable, almost irresistible curiosity began to gnaw relentlessly at me, like an insidious worm burrowing into my brain. What or who was the true source of these terrifying, inexplicable phenomena that plagued my nights? What shadowy, arcane dealings was Mr. Adekunle actually involved in that required such bizarre nocturnal journeys and necessitated such extreme secrecy? And most pressingly, the question that tormented me above all others: what in God's name was actually happening in the back of that Mercedes, right behind my head, so close yet so terrifyingly unseen, that I was so absolutely, stringently forbidden to witness? The rearview mirror, once just a mundane, practical tool for safe driving, now loomed large in my consciousness as a forbidden, tantalizing gateway, a potential portal to unimaginable truths or horrors. The urge to just glance, to steal a single fleeting look, became a tormenting whisper of its own, a dangerous, seductive counterpoint to Mr. Adekunle's solemn, ominous warning. It was like an unbearable itch I couldn't scratch, growing more insistent, more maddening, with each passing, terror-filled night, pushing me closer to a breaking point I feared was inevitable. One relatively normal afternoon, while I was out running some errands for Mama Rose in the familiar neighborhood, I ran into Ben, an old, dear friend from my younger days, a brother from another mother. We used to be completely inseparable back in the day. Two ambitious young lads sharing wild dreams of making it big in the bustling city, of escaping the daily grind. He took one long, hard look at me, his usually cheerful brow furrowed with genuine concern. "Michael, man, you look incredibly tired." "No, more than just tired, my friend. You look like you've actually seen a ghost, bro. Like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." He clapped me sympathetically on the shoulder, his touch surprisingly grounding. "This new big shot driver job, all these long hours, it's not completely sucking the life out of you, is it? You need to take care of yourself." I forced a weak, unconvincing laugh, quickly deflecting his well-meaning concern with some vague, dismissive talk of demanding schedules and the challenges of working for such an important man. But his perceptive words stuck with me, echoing uncomfortably in my mind. The invisible, terrifying world I was now an unwilling part of was clearly leaving visible, undeniable traces on me, and others, those who knew me well, were starting to notice. The profound isolation of my secret life felt heavier and more suffocating than ever before. The immense, unrelenting pressure was building, mounting steadily with each passing day and each terrifying night. Each nocturnal shift with Mr. Adekunle felt like I was walking an even tighter, more precarious rope, stretched taut over a bottomless abyss of madness and the unknown. The disturbing phenomena in the car weren't lessening with time or familiarity. If anything, they felt more intensely personal now, more deliberately directed at me, as if testing the very limits of my endurance, my sanity. The ghostly whispers sometimes seemed to actively mock my steadfast restraint, their tones laced with a chilling, insidious amusement. The shadows flickering at the edge of my vision danced with a newfound, knowing intelligence, as if aware of my internal struggle. My fear was still immense, a cold, hard knot of terror residing permanently in my gut. But now it wrestled daily with a desperate, almost overwhelming need to understand, to see, to finally reclaim some small sense of control over my own mind, or at the very least, some form of comprehension of the horrors I was facing. Mama Rose's wise words about bright days and the shadows they inevitably cast echoed constantly in my thoughts. I was deep within the shadow now, deeper than I ever imagined possible, and the thought of disobeying Mr. Adekunle, of taking that one forbidden, potentially soul-shattering look, began to slowly shift from an unthinkable, absolute horror to a terrifying, yet almost irresistible, desperate possibility. For now, the weight of Mr. Adekunle's stern warning and the vivid memory of that fierce, protective heat from the leather pouch held me back from the brink. But for how much longer could I resist the siren call of the unknown? Sleep? Are you kidding me? There was absolutely no way I was sleeping soundly after those terrifying encounters, especially not after that first truly, deeply terrifying night that changed everything. How could I possibly find rest? Mr. Adekunle's chilling words kept replaying endlessly in my head, a haunting loop. Tonight was just an introduction, that one single, seemingly simple rule. Never, ever look in the car's rearview mirror after midnight. It had violently thrown me headfirst, with no warning, into a hidden world I never even knew was out there. A world I desperately wished I could unsee, unknow. A clandestine world teeming with shadows and whispers of ancient, forgotten rites and powerful, unseen entities. All hidden right under our very noses, concealed beneath the bustling, modern veneer of my beloved city. Mama Rose was so profoundly right. Even the brightest, most vibrant day casts a long, dark shadow, and boy, was I driving straight into the deepest, most terrifying end of it. Night after terrifying, soul-crushing night. My old life felt like a distant dream. This metropolis, my metropolis, it wasn't just a place of relentless hustle and infectious laughter anymore. Not for me. Now, it was a place of profound, terrifying secrets, ancient and incredibly powerful ones that had existed long before the skyscrapers and traffic jams. And somehow, incredibly me, Michael, just a regular kid from the crowded streets of my youth, I was now inextricably tangled up with one of its oldest, most formidable, and most terrifying hidden parts. I never, ever imagined that money, even the vast sums Mr. Adekunle possessed, could buy you passage into stuff like this, that behind all those shiny, opulent rich people houses and high-gated compounds, there was a direct, undeniable link to a whole other world, a shadowy realm Mr. Adekunle navigated with an unnerving, almost casual ease that chilled me to the bone. And I was just the driver, a reluctant, terrified witness to things no sane person would ever believe, things I could never speak of. So, what other unimaginable terrors were waiting for me out there in the darkness on the nights yet to come? What further, more harrowing tests of my courage and obedience did Mr. Adekunle have in store for his unsuspecting driver? And the biggest question of all, the one that haunted my waking hours and my few fitful moments of sleep. What would finally happen if my burgeoning curiosity, that gnawing, relentless, maddening itch to know, to see, finally, really, got the better of me? If you want to find out what I eventually saw in that cursed rearview mirror, and what terrible price I ultimately had to pay for taking that single forbidden look, you better subscribe to this channel and make sure you hit that notification bell, because you are not going to want to miss the next chapter of this story. You seriously won't believe the shocking secrets this city and its mysterious, enigmatic billionaire were hiding from the world. And hey, before you go, let me know down in the comments, have you ever had something happen to you that you just absolutely can't explain? Something that made you question everything you thought you knew about reality? Because trust me on this, some doors, once you even crack them open a tiny bit, they don't ever really close again, no matter how hard you try to slam them shut.